So whether you're sitting or lying down, take a few moments just to arrive. So that might mean slowing down your breath, being very aware of your breathing, or just letting everything sort of drop in. See if you can move from external sensibilities, your to-do list, whatever is pulling you forward, move from those outer sensibilities to your inner sensibilities. You could watch the breath here, moving in and out of the nostrils. Connect to the rise and fall of your breath. Or bring your focus to an area of your body that might feel like it's holding. And let that go. And then in your seat, just stir as if you were a spoon in a pot. Stir through your pelvic bowl. So imagine that bowl shape. And just take your upper body around in some circles. Might be quite small, could be quite large. Take it in both directions and just stir through your pelvic bowl. And then come back to a neutral position. So as you sit, both sit bones are equally weighted. And imagine that your feet, you're standing in Tadasana, your feet are underneath you, and your pelvic bowl is situated completely even over your feet. So in other words, you're not tipped too far forward in the pelvic bowl, spilling out any liquid that might be in that bowl, or too far back. You're just centered right over your feet. Great. Now unfold, come to your back. Just lie on your back, and we did this last week, so this is called pendiculation. Invoke a yawn and just allow your body to move or stretch with that yawn. Do it a couple times. Just make yourself yawn. And allow whatever's going to happen in your body to happen. And then try it a few times without the yawn. Great. Then bend your knees, take the soles of your feet to the floor. You take your hands to the top of your thighs, where the thighs meet the pelvis area, and just press the upper legs into the upper legs, creating a little bit of space between your thigh and your hip bone, this bony juncture in the front. Good. And then just release your hands, and then just a few pelvic tilts. So imagining that bowl, you can close your eyes, imagine that bowl area, again, your pelvis. Tilt the bowl, pubic bone away from navel. That's the anterior tilt, forward tilt. And then tilt pubic bone back towards navel. That's a posterior tilt. Move back and forth in that manner. And then rest in a neutral position. Not too far forward, not too far back. So we do these movements, you know, these anterior and posterior tilt to find the place, the sweet spot in between, the neutral place. Good. And then just take a couple of breaths here in neutral. Now we're going to work with the breath and the muscles in the pelvic floor. And we're going to work with both gathering on the exhale and gathering on the inhale. Okay, just because it doesn't matter, we're just working to feel and understand what's happening in the pelvic floor. So on your next exhale, as you exhale, gather your pelvic floor between rectum and genitals. So it's like you're hugging your tailbone near the back. And then at the front of the pelvic floor, you're sort of bringing the back and the front together. That's going to be on your next exhale. And then inhale. And then exhale, draw the back of the pelvic floor and the front of the pelvic floor towards one another, kind of a scrunching up. And then inhale. Exhale, gather front and back together, and then gather the whole pelvic floor up towards the navel. Inhale. Exhale, gather. And then at the very end, see if you can gather the hip pointers towards one another. Inhale. Now do all of those actions together on your next exhale. So you'll feel lower abdominals contracting, probably some in the lower back. And then inhale. And then let it go. Just take a couple of relaxed breaths without any intentional thinking about anything at all. Okay. And now this time on your inhale, gather the pelvic floor. Gather it up towards your navel. Gather hip pointers in. Exhale, release. On your inhale, gather up towards the navel, hip pointers in towards one another. Exhale, release. So a few more times. Inhale is the gathering, but I really want you to concentrate on the exhale and letting everything go. One more round. And then just relax, just normal breathing without the super intentional breath here. Great, and then now we're going to work with some of the musculature around the hips. So let's take a figure four with right ankle on left knee. And just bring your knees in towards your chest. Feel the outer right hip. Maybe you can string the right hand through the space, take the back of your left leg, the hamstring, draw the knees in. And if you were practicing with me last week, we talked about staying within these boundaries of sensation. So as you draw your knees in, stop when you first feel the sensation and let that be where you land. Now on the inhale, you could draw pubic bone away from navel. So a little forward tilt in the pelvis, and on your exhale, pubic bone back towards navel, flattening your back towards the floor, a little posterior tilt. And then find right in the center, keeping your pelvis in a neutral position for 2 more breaths as you stretch and strengthen the outer hip. Great, release and take the other ankle, left ankle on the right knee. You could start with your feet on the floor. This might be where you need to be to stay in those boundaries, or draw your knees in towards your chest. Maybe string the left hand through the space, taking the back of your right leg. But wherever you find the sensation, just stop there. And then you can add a little bit of pelvic tilting. Which is going to help you find neutral. And stay there and take a few more breaths. So we start with this really subtle work, really feeling into, really identifying what's the area that we're working with. It's a big area for sure, because we're talking not just about the subtlety of the pelvic floor and the way the pelvic floor, the abdominals, the low back all work together, but hips and legs as well. Good, then release, take your legs long. Stretch through both heels, toes back towards the shins. And then keep your right leg long, bend your left knee and take your left foot to the outside of your right leg. Take your right hand to the outside of your left thigh and draw your knee over a little bit more or in towards you a little bit more until you feel sensation in the outer left hip. Take a couple of breaths here. Feel for a light engagement in your core. So you're not over gripping. And you can release. Take your left leg long, bend your right knee, bring your right foot to the outside of your left leg. Left hand to the outside of the right thigh. And draw the right knee across and in till you feel something, some sensation in your outer right hip. From here, again, not over gripping, just enough contraction in the abdominals, in the back, in the pelvic floor to maintain a nice neutral pelvis. And then release, take both legs long, stretching through both feet, one at a time, one heel at a time. Great, now we're going to start to roll towards the left side. Bend your right knee, and as you roll towards the left side, take the top of your right foot right behind your left knee. Okay, so you might roll and have your right shoulder picked up off the floor. You might have your right arm extended, so arms are in T. It's a pretty big twist. You decide, right shoulder can just be working towards the floor, left hand to the outside of the right thigh. Now notice if you're holding, gripping anywhere, can you release into the stretch, into the twist? And if your body is just not quite ready for that, just back off a little bit. Find that area where the sensation comes up and just back off. On your next inhale, we'll all come back to our backs and pull knees into chest. Pull your knees into your chest, towards your chest. Take a few breaths here. And then we'll straighten the legs, go to the other side. So now as we roll towards the right side, the top of the left foot just hooks behind the right knee. Arms out at T, or the left hand on your left rib basket, right hand to the outer left thigh. And the left shoulder, we're sort of intending it down towards the floor. If you've just woken up and you're starting your day, this might be a lot of opening and you might just need to back off a little bit. So working within these good parameters of sensation and not going out past our edge. Everyone, inhale back to your back, pull your knees into your chest. Take a few rounds of breath here. You might even take a few little pelvic tilts, just really, really gentle, subtle pelvic tilting here. And releasing hips down to the floor. Then from here, you can roll to one side, press yourself up to a seat. Make sure you have blocks, 2 blocks, if possible, your strap, and then come to table and begin to work through some cat-cows. So hands underneath shoulders and knees underneath hips. And as you move through cat-cow, you'll be aware of this pelvic tilting. On the inhale, you draw your pubic bone away from your navel. Let your belly reach down towards the floor. Okay, this is anterior tilt, forward tilt of the pelvic bowl. And on your exhale, round your back, tilt your pubic bone back towards your navel, posterior tilt, and move back and forth. And again, we're getting some nice movement in the spine, but we're also building awareness of the pelvic bowl. And then find neutral. Find neutral. You can bring your knees a little closer in, and with your pelvis in neutral, take a block right on your sacral and balance it there. And then extend left leg out, right arm out. And hopefully the block stays right where it is. If you're tilted to one side, the block might drop off. So see if you can find level hips. Good. Then release. Knees and hands back to the floor. And then opposite leg long, right leg long, left arm out. Finding neutral. So often the leg that gets extended, that hip, hikes up in the air, and that would topple the block off. So we want to keep your pelvis nice and level here. Good. And release, hand back to the floor, knee back to the floor. You can take the block away. Just set it in front. And this time now, let's take the right leg up in the air. The sole of your foot is going to be reaching towards the ceiling. Thigh parallel to the floor and lower leg perpendicular to the floor. That's going to be the inhale. On your exhale, round through your back, bring your knee in towards your chest. Inhale, back to the starting position. Peek up here if you need to see. Exhale, round through your back and bring your knee towards your nose or towards your chest. And do just a few more here. And then you can take your knee back to the floor. If you need to sit back and roll through your wrists a couple times, if your wrists are getting a little worked here on the hands and knees, we'll take the left foot up like we're going to step on the ceiling. So the thigh is parallel to the floor and the lower leg perpendicular to the floor. That's our inhale. Feel for a level pelvis. Exhale, round, bring your knee in towards your chin or your nose or your chest. And inhale. Back to the starting position. Exhale, round. Now, again, stay within a healthy sensation. As you move through this little vinyasa. Good. And then both knees down to the floor. Bring your hips back towards your heels in child's pose. Turn your palms up, resting the back of your hands on the floor. Then palms down, inhale into cow. Turn toes under, exhale, downward facing dog. Now in your mind's eye, can you see that your pelvic bowl is stacked over your feet and centered? Inhale, come back down to cow. Exhale, round and set your hips back, child's pose. Inhale to cow. And we like to go, I like to go into downward dog from this inhaled position. So I have that little arch in my back. And what happens when I turn my toes under and press my hips up and back now, my pelvic bowl, because of the orientation of my body in downward dog, if you peek up here, you'll see I have a little arch in my back, flat back, not rounded back, and my pelvic bowl is stacked over my feet. That's what I want you to see and work with in your own mind's eye. Then come down to the knees on the inhale, cow, round and press back, child's pose. Gonna do a few more rounds of that vinyasa. Cow, turn toes under, up and back, downward facing dog. Inhale, cow. Exhale, round. And come back to child's pose. Backs of the hands to the floor, palms up. And then press yourself up onto your knees, sweep your arms up. And exhale, hands through heart center. Now imagine that your knees are your feet. Is your pelvic bowl centered over your feet? Bring your right foot forward. Right foot forward. And then drop into a lunge. Lift your back foot. Take your back foot with your left foot with your left hand. Back foot with left hand. Right foot is forward. Left foot is back. Stretching the quad here. Working. Press back up. Both knees to the ground. Stack your pelvic bowl right over your knees, right over your little short legs. And then left foot forward. Drop into a lunge. Reach the right foot up. Take it with your right hand. Release, come back, set both knees underneath you. Stack or notice your pelvis, your pelvic bowl centered over your knees. Then bring your hands back to the floor into cow. Turn toes under, press up and back, downward facing dog. Now rock forward into high dandasana. Now as your pelvic bowl is still stacked over your feet, press through your heels, reach through your crown. Gather just enough at the pelvic floor and the abdominals. Press back, downward dog. Inhale, reach the right leg out. Notice when you reach the right leg out, do you tilt over to the left? Keep your pelvis nice and level, right to left. Then exhale, bend your knee and draw your knee forward as you rock forward. Inhale, right leg extends out. In your mind's eye, see your pelvis. The levelness of your pelvis. Exhale, come forward. One more time. And then this time as you come forward, bring your right foot between your hands. Pressing into both feet equally, come up, hands to your front thigh. Lift the back leg. Notice now if you have, imagine that your feet are right underneath you. Is your pelvis and your pelvic bowl centered over your feet? Inhale, arms up, crescent lunge. Inhale to reach the fingertips up, and exhale, turn your back foot and open into warrior two. Again, pay attention to your pelvis, your pelvic bowl. Is it centered over where your feet, if your feet were right underneath you? Inhale, sweep the arms back up, turn the back foot, return to crescent lunge. And then bring your back foot forward, straighten your front leg, and fold here. You could take your hands to your shin, but if you have your block handy, take your block to the outside of your front foot. Outside of the front foot. So we're in sort of a variation of revolved triangle. Now draw your right hip back and left hip forward, seeing if you can center your pelvis. Right to left. And bend through the front knee. Press yourself up to standing. So you're sort of in a short Vira 1 stance. Bring both feet together, Tadasana. And stack your pelvic bowl over your feet in Tadasana. Stack your pelvic bowl over your feet in Tadasana. Inhale, sweep your arms up. And exhale, fold through center. Take your hands to the floor. Step yourself back, downward facing dog. Bend through your knees generously and draw pubic bone away from navel. So you get a big arch in the back, maybe even overdo it. And then start to straighten your legs and see if that downward dog feels any different. Inhale, left leg out behind you. Keep your pelvis nice and level. Exhale, round forward. Bring your knee in towards your chest. Inhale, left leg out. Exhale, come forward. Inhale. Exhale. Last time, inhale. And then come forward with the left foot and bring it between your hands. So you're in a low lunge. Inhale, press up, hands to the front thigh. Lift the back leg. Put your hands on your hip pointers and feel for this level pelvis right over where your feet would be underneath you. Inhale, sweep your arms up. Exhale, turn the back foot and open into warrior two. And the stance doesn't have to be big. It can be a little shorter stance. But now imagine your pelvic bowl, your feet right underneath you. And are you lined up, stacked, pelvic bowl over feet? Inhale to turn back to crescent lunge. And exhale as you step forward slightly with the back foot. You're going to bow. Take your hand to your thigh or hand to the block on the outside of the left foot. Then draw the left hip back and the right hip forward in an attempt to square your hips, to level the pelvis. This is a variation of revolved triangle. Inhale, step forward, press up, Tadasana. When you come back to Tadasana, find that your hips, your pelvic bowl stacked over your feet. Keep your block or blocks handy at the front of your mat. Inhale, scoop the arms up. Exhale, fold through center, hands to the mat, step back, downward facing dog. Bend through your knees, tilt the pelvis forward, so pubic bone away from navel, re-extend the legs. going for pelvic bowl stacked over the feet. Inhale to come forward into the high dandasana. And exhale, come back, downward facing dog. Inhale the right leg out behind you. And exhale, round through your back, bring your knee in towards your nose and bring your foot forward between your hands. Inhale, come up, hands on front thigh, front knee, and then all the way up into crescent lunge. Inhale to reach the fingertips, find the appropriate orientation of your pelvis. Exhale, open into warrior two. Inhale, come back, crescent lunge. And exhale as you step the back foot forward, tilting, folding, right hand to a block on the right side of your front foot, and draw the right hip back, squaring up your pelvis. Now we're going to move from here into a variation of Vera 3, Warrior 3. I like this with 2 blocks, but 1 block would work as well. I'm just going to grab my blocks here and bring both blocks in front of the short edge of my mat. Then rocking my weight onto my front foot, I lift the back leg in Vera 3. You could do this with 1 block sort of right in the front of your short edge of your mat. Now notice in your mind's eye, are your hips level? Inhale, exhale, bend through your elbows and shoot that back leg up even higher. Press back up. And then release your back leg down, bend through both knees, press yourself up, arms above you, and then exhale, hands through heart center. Tadasana. Notice if you've shifted in any way, you line your pelvis up, pelvic bowl over the feet. Inhale, sweep arms up. Exhale, bend through your knees and fold. Take your hands to the mat, step back, downward facing dog. Inhale the left leg out. And exhale, round through your back as you bring that knee forward, and then your foot to in between your hands, the front of your mat. Inhale, press up, either all the way up or come to hands on the knees. And inhale, crescent lunge. Exhale, turn your back foot open, warrior 2. Pelvic bowl lined up over your feet. Inhale, come back, crescent lunge. Exhale, you'll shorten your stance and bring your left hand to the shin or to a block on the outside of your left foot. Draw your left hip back, right hip forward. Then hinge forward, lean forward, both hands on blocks. You can take 1 block in front of you. I think it feels a little more balanced to have 2 blocks here. Press into the standing leg, lift the back leg. And this back leg, not so much worried about how high it is, but rather how you can keep your pelvis level here. Keep your pelvis level. Inhale, exhale, bend through your elbows and come to standing splits. Any amount of lift is fine, just keep the pelvis level. Push back. Right foot to left foot. Bend through the knees, press yourself up, arms up, and release hands through heart center. Good. We'll try 1 balance here. 1 more without the blocks, a balance without the blocks. So you have a couple of choices. If you have a belt, you can have a loop in the belt or the belt just open, doesn't matter. So we'll begin, let's begin with the right foot lifted. So right foot lifted, knees are lined up with one another, and you could simply tilt forward here. Or you can take the strap on your right foot. I'm using a loop, a little bit easier. And the loop is going to go, I'm going to catch the top of my foot, and then I'm going to work my hands up the strap towards the loop, both hands on the strap, and come into a variation of dancer. Hinge at the waist here. And again, I'm really focused on my pelvis, the pelvic bowl being centered, evenly balanced over my foot, standing foot. Release. Take a wide stance and just move through your hips. Sort of settling anything there. And then the other side. So weight is now on the right foot. Again, there's lots of options here. You could just take a standing four. Line up knees, hinging at the waist. Or take your strap, taking your loop, the top captures the top of your foot. You take the tail in both hands. Now I really want to think about, what is my pelvis doing? As I tilt forward in this variation of dancer, pelvis right and left, and then anterior, posterior tilt balanced right over my standing foot. And then you can back off, take the strap off, get a nice wide stance. Move through your hips. Some big circles through the hips. And then take your favorite way to get to the floor, which could just be coming down to the floor, or it could be a sun salutation. Once on the floor, we're going to bring the right knee forward and the back leg back in pigeon. So in this pigeon, if you can see my hips, all right, my hips are level. If pigeon, if this orientation with the tummy down towards the floor doesn't work for you, this is really just figure 4 on your back as well. But what I want here is I don't want, might have to prop something under the right hip to keep your pelvis level and balanced. Okay, and then we can come to forearms. And some of you maybe all the way down to the floor. But if you notice yourself falling over to one side, to the right side, then you need to prop something underneath that hip. You can stay upright here, or you could go to your back, cross your right ankle on top of your left knee. All the same. It's the same pose. stretch the back leg, really think about in your mind's eye, those hip pointers, are they even? Or you tilted in some way? Then you'll take your prop away if you have a prop. Drop onto your right hip and bring your left foot to the outside of your right leg. When you do that, if you tilt onto your right hip and your left sit bone is not on the floor, straighten the right leg so that both sit bones are on the floor. So you're sitting evenly and your pelvic bowl is in a neutral position. And then you can just bring this left knee in towards your chest. So we're staying within the boundary that allows us to really have the pelvis level and the pelvic bowl even. Good. You might be able to take your right arm and gather the left knee into this, towards your chest in this twist. Or it might just be right here. Now from here, you extend both legs out. So you're in Dandasana. And again, if you notice, most of us will want our hands either behind us or right even with the hips, so that we can keep the neutral tilt in the pelvis. So if you're rolling backwards onto the back of your sit bones, you need to probably come into this position with your hands way back. So you've got a neutral tilt in the pelvis. So imagine your pelvic bowl and your feet now are underneath you, and you've got the pelvic bowl balanced. No water tilting out over the front or spilling out over the back. Good. And then from here, we can bend through the left knee, extend the right leg. We'll take pigeon on the other side. So either on your back or in this position, the same thing. If you find that you have to, that you tilt, that you fall over to the left side, then you want to put something underneath your left hip. So I'm keeping my pelvis level. And whether your arms are extended or you're down on your forearms or you're lying all the way down, doesn't matter. Or if you're on your back, the awareness is in the pelvis. If this is at all hard on your knee, you want to go to your back and do this on your back. So it'd be left ankle on right knee. Then walk the hands up, take the prop away. If we've got a prop, drop onto the left hip, swing the right leg around, scoot the left foot out of the way. You might be able to, this side might be different, and you might be able to be evenly sitting on both sit bones with your left leg bent. If not, straighten that leg. Sit up nice and tall. Notice if you're rounding in your back. So yeah, that's a posterior tilt of the pelvis. And if that's happening, you might have to take your hands behind you. Really balancing the pelvic bowl. From here, we'll straighten the legs again, Dandasana. And again, you could sit up on a blanket, on the edge of a blanket, but I like this better in terms of keeping that neutral arch and the neutral orientation of the pelvis. So some of us will be way back here. Some of us can be closer to the hips. And some of us can keep that orientation and fold forward. But you might be restricted, generally speaking, if you have tight hamstrings and glutes, that's going to put your pelvis in a posterior tilt where you're dumping into your back, you're rounded in the back. So that in this particular pose will probably show itself. From here now, open up into a wide stance with your legs. Again, imagine that your feet are underneath you and you've got your pelvic bowl balanced right over your feet. You might, again, have your hands behind you so that you're not spilling the water out of the pelvic bowl. Some of us can have our hands in the front, and some of us will be able to hinge and fold, keeping the pelvic bowl nice and balanced over our feet. Take a little twist right and left here if that's feels like what wants to happen. Good. Then we'll bring legs together, come down onto our back. Pull your knees into your chest here. Releasing your low back, really letting your low back soften into the ground, into the floor. Great. And then soles of the feet to the floor, and we're going to go into bridge. So what I want you to notice in bridge is if one side of your pelvis lifts higher than the other. So we'll start with a little bridge. So bring the upper arms into the floor, elbows bent, fingers pointing up at the ceiling. Press your feet into the floor and just tilt the pelvis ever so slightly forward. So pubic bone away from navel. Then lift your hips. Now you might have to just put your hands on your hips to feel. You might be able to look and see if you have a even pelvis. And as you continue to lift in your hips, going to any height that feels appropriate for understanding this in your body, because this is about self-discovery. Feel for an evenness right and left. Generally speaking, I would say that as we maybe take it a bit bigger, like roll the shoulders under, interlace hands, and then pressing up, we're going to have one side that's higher than the other. So can you feel for an evenness in your pelvis, in your hips? Remember now, the pelvic bowl is stacked over the feet, right? The end of the legs, our knees in this case, right? We've already been here when we were standing on our knees. Is your pelvic bowl stacked over, balanced over your knees, if that was the length of your legs, right? Then roll yourself out. Might take a little twist, a windshield wiper side to side. Good, and then the last thing thing before we drop into Shavasana is we'll just settle the sacrum again. I'm going to just show you the abbreviated version of that. So bring your knees up over your chest and take 2 fists between the knees. Press your knees into your fists, about 20% effort, and release. Press, release. Press, release. Don't make it a big effort here. 20, 30% of your effort. You're squeezing your fists and then release. Good. Now hands to the outside of your knees. Press into your hands, release. Press into your hands, with your knees, release. Press, release. Press, release. Now hands to the top of your thighs. Press your knees and your hands into one another. Just really not too much effort, friends. Release. Press, release. Press, release. Hands to the top of your shins. Press those 2 things together. Knees and hands, release. One of these positions is going to feel, one of these little movements is going to feel really good to you. This one feels the best to me. So that's the one I'm going to stick with a few more times. But it might be squeezing your fists together. It might be pressing out against the hands. Just a couple more times. So we're sort of reorienting the sacrum. And then you can take the soles of your feet to the floor, knees in a resting position, or legs long, traditional Shavasana. Now you let everything go. Let everything soften. Give yourself this gift of just letting go, coming into stillness, and resting your body. Breath is easy. Soften your hands. Soften your eyes. The space between your brow. A mental grasping. Feel the length and volume of your legs. The weight of your arms. Soften your hands. Just let any thoughts pass through like clouds in the sky. Stay as long as you like in the Shavasana, or you can come up to your seat and we'll